They said the truth won't survive beside the lies that maintain the decaying faces of this place.
Hey everybody, what's up? This is Hold the Truth Hostage, where if the truth was so important, we wouldn't negotiate with lies. Now, this video is a follow-up to my future video. This video is gonna be about GMO children. Now, with everything going on, my thoughts is that in the future, we're going to have genetically modified children. Now think about it. We had GMO food where they genetically modified the food that we're eating. So it's only a matter of time, especially with the low birth rate and everything that's going on and the great divide between men and women, that we're going to have genetically modified children. And we're not only going to have genetically modified children because of the divide between men and women due to the family court and all the divisive things that separate men and women from true equality. Another reason we're going to have genetically modified children is that it's already been signaled with the space launch by Tesla and the space race by all these private companies. It's not gonna make sense. And I'm gonna tell you this, you watch a lot of futuristic movies. You know, you watch iRobot, you watch Blade Runner. For my anime fans, you watch Gundam. You watched Ghost in the Shell. Anything that takes place in the future, the biggest lie they present to us is that men and women are still having children the natural way. You know, it doesn't make sense that, you know, we want to go to space, and a lot of the government and a lot of the agenda has been to sell you a future that looks exactly like today, but with better technology. For example, we're going to have hovering cars. You're still going to be taking your kids to school. You're still going to have to get married and all this and that. The truth is, in the future, that's not going to make any sense, because you have to understand, especially with space travel, it doesn't make sense that we men are going to space and we're gonna take a woman into space. And we've seen all the movies. You've seen Alien, you've seen all these futuristic movies where they still have men and women, you know, the natural order. But for us to actually reach space and have families, and for my fans that watch Gundam, space colonies, and actually to go to space, we're going to have to take the inconvenience of waiting 9 months for a child to be born, then waiting 9 months for a woman to have and incubate that child inside of her. It's going to become too much of an inconvenience. You watch a lot of films right now, like I keep saying, any film you watch in the future, they present the same old primal way of having children between a man and a woman. You know, the Jetsons, all that. Any futuristic movie you watch, you know, it's a lie. The reason it's a lie, they're trying to sell you that in the future, we're still going to be operating the same way. It's still going to be man and woman to have a kid, because they want you to get comfortable. They want you to be comfortable. Oh man, in the future, I'm going to have a better phone, better cars, hover cars, better technology, and things will always be the same. But in reality, it's too much of an inconvenience to wait 9 months. Think about that. They're taking you into space. Let's say they're trying to colonize Mars. How is it gonna make sense for you're gonna take women into the spaceship which has low gravity, then you're gonna want that woman to get pregnant and have kids in space. It's too much of a liability. It's too much of a risk. So what's gonna happen is, to remove that inconvenience, is we're gonna have genetically modified children where, where they'll have a kid, all they'll need is a DNA sample, from a man, and they'll put it in this little chamber, and that child will grow in potentially an artificial womb in like a chamber. And think about it, it's gonna be quicker, less inconvenient, for space travel. Now, where does it start outside of space? What's gonna happen, since we have this great divide between men and women, and we have this constant push about the patriarchy, and straight men are demons and they're masculine, and all the negative aspects pushed into the direction of a straight man. What's gonna happen, and what feminists don't realize, is they're basically fueling their replacement. What I mean by this is that eventually, because of the way YouTube works, I can't say the G word, but eventually, in fact, let me say, forget it. Eventually, the 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 gay men in the community, in the LGBTQ community, they're gonna want to have children without the stain of the straight man and the patriarchy. That's been pushed by the feminists, that agenda that, the patriarchy starts with the straight man. So what's gonna happen is a lot of gay men and and the reason, and trans men gonna want their own children without having the straight route, where it would need to happen through a woman. And another thing is, the gay men and the LGBTQ men are gonna want children without the stain of the straight community in their eyes, because all that's being pushed is that the patriarchy, I said, it begins with the straight man. So once the gay men in the country want to have their own children, because it's been proven that, we men have the X and Y chromosome, and they said that you could take the DNA of a man and actually have a child. You can create, just from that man's DNA sample, a child. So what's going to happen is, and since a lot of the feminist community has pushed and over empowered the non-straight man community, there's no way for feminists who have destroyed the conservative family, who said that women are slaves if they serve their family and they serve their husband instead of strangers that they work for, their boss and the politicians. They won't have a counterattack. They won't be able to say, well, this gay man and this trans man having a child through genetic modification, GMO, having children through an artificial womb is wrong. That's what a lot of feminists don't realize, is that and you can watch my video series, The Price of Feminism, and I would say, you can watch 1 and 2, and you can watch Feminism is the Future, the series I made. It goes deeper into it, but I'm just focusing on it. What's gonna happen, and the thing is this: straight men have, a majority of straight men have a loyalty to having children the natural and old way, man and woman. But the gay man and men from the LGBTQ community, they, on the other hand, do not have that loyalty to that old-fashioned way of having children. So what's gonna happen, and especially because of lawsuits that have happened where a gay man gave his he gave his sperm to a woman, she had a baby, and she sued him for child support. And you could look this up through Google. You could Google it. And another thing is some surrogates have sued for child support. So a lot of the gay men are going to remove themselves from that, you know. And the other reason is that countries like a China, Korea, where you could look it up, they're selling clones of cats. You could clone your pets. I think it's like maybe $10,000 or something like that for you to clone your pet. What's gonna happen, and especially because of two ways this is gonna happen. It's gonna be between the feminist agenda that has already destroyed the structure of family, and it's gonna be the gay men and LGBTQ men that are looking for an alternative, that they want to have children through their own genetic means, without going through a woman for surrogacy. So what's gonna happen, and how we're gonna get to genetically modified children, and we're gonna remove the old way of having kids, is gonna be looked as primal and outdated. What's gonna happen is that a lot of women who want to keep their figure, don't want to have a child to destroy their figure and actually trigger motherhood and all that, they're gonna pressure, and especially once China and Japan and countries where they don't have BS when it comes to what's humane or playing God. I always laugh at when they say, "Oh, you're playing God." So I'm playing God by reaching my potential. So you're basically saying when a person achieves something, it's what God is limited to. So you're trying to reach God's limit when God should have no limits. That's why when they say the whole thing, you're playing God, it's BS. It's to limit you, and in actuality, it disrespects the meaning of what a God is. That whatever we achieve is capable of reaching what a God can do. It's funny how they'll say, God created the world in 7 days, yet you go out there and you clone a child. One child, you're equal to God. It's BS. What's gonna happen is countries like China, and especially after the whole C-19, I don't want to say the whole name, that might trigger a flag thing. After C-19, where people are getting sick and all that, they already have ways to genetically modify your children. But what's going to happen is countries like China, Korea, and countries where they do the cloning of animals, they're going to understand that we need healthier people. We need to actually speed up the process to have healthier people, especially with C-19, and it'll be far less of an inconvenience if we had an artificial way of making children without us worrying about getting the mother sick. So what's going to happen is that, once, especially another thing is with how the population is shrinking all over the world, you know, once they push that genetic modification, GMO children, or, children born through artificial wombs, and where they just take your DNA, what's going to happen is that a lot of men, and especially the men that are single right now, the ones that also don't want to deal with having a child through the organic means, they're probably going to end up going to China or those countries where they allow cloning, and they could take a DNA sample, because I heard all they need is like a stem cell from a man, and they said the only way you could clone a child, produce a child through artificial means, is through a man, because you have the X and Y chrome, unlike a woman that could only be cloned. So what's gonna happen is a lot of men are gonna invest in that. Think about it. What if it only cost, let's say, what if it only costs $20 to about $50,000 to have a child? Where they would take your DNA sample, and they could make sure that that child's gonna be healthy, It's going to be immune to a lot of things. And another thing is that child could be born and come to you healthier in probably a month to, a month or so, month to about 8, 9 months. Because what's going to happen also with the genetic GMO children is going to happen, or GMO babies. Yeah, that's more catchy. GMO babies, what's going to happen is they're going to, perfect it where it won't take no more than probably a month or two to actually grow this child. You know what I'm saying? And it'll be less inconvenient than having it the natural way. Because as technology advances, it doesn't make sense. It's too inconvenient for you to wait 9 months. Think about the process of having a child, between a man and a woman. So for 9 months, let's say 9 to about 10 months, you have to provide for that, that mother, and you have to ensure there's a home, house, food, all that stuff. It's too inconvenient, you know. So what's, for men that don't want to go through that process, what's going to happen, and it's going to be far more affordable to have a GMO baby, genetically modified child through DNA samples. It's going to be, it won't require you providing a home for 8 months. It's just going to be you provide a DNA sample to, a hospital or wherever they're going to, genetically modify and bring this child to the world. And another reason the gay men and the LGBT men are gonna go for this route is they're gonna perfect the way for you to merge DNA, as in, how a man and a woman have a child where it's half your DNA, half her DNA. What's gonna happen is they're gonna do, they're gonna be able to mix the DNA of two men to create a son that has, both of their DNA, or a daughter, or whatever they want. You know, and the thing is this, it's going to be far easier with GMO babies to actually keep the DNA clean and safe. Because here's the big problem is that your wife is pregnant, or your girlfriend, whatever girl whatever is pregnant. And for 9 months, 9 to about, let's say 9 to 12 months, you have to hope that this woman that's pregnant with your child doesn't drink beer, doesn't smoke, doesn't do any drugs or anything like that. So what's gonna happen is, especially with how the divorce rates are increasing and the population is declining, what's gonna happen is a lot of men are gonna turn away from surrogacy because it costs too much. The woman's the middleman with her egg, and then she has to give birth, and there's risk of, illness and death for that child. So what's gonna happen, especially once China and countries that have less, less BS rules on, oh, don't play God and this and that. What's gonna happen is these countries will perfect it. And then what you're going to see is a rise, because one thing they haven't shown, and once it reaches this number, once over 1% of men in the country are not getting married, not having children. Like, for example, the black community is actually what you got to look at. They say about over 35% of the black men in the black community aren't having children with black women. They're not having children at all. So what happens, and we already have a population decline. We have an issue with the population as we speak. So what's going to happen is, the government won't admit it's wrong. It never will. So what it's going to do is it's going to slowly and eventually it's going to allow men to basically take their DNA and basically have a child through, GMO, genetic modification. You know what I'm saying? Where they take your DNA sample and make a baby. And they're already doing this. Think about all the 23andMe, all the Ancestry.com, where they're swabbing and collecting DNA. There was a movie, I forget the name of the movie, but they went to space and they had the DNA of everybody. And what they were going to do is once they land, they were going to clone and recreate these people. So what you think 23andMe and all the Ancestry.com and all these DNA collection sites are doing? They're collecting your DNA, and eventually what they're going to do, they're going to basically use that DNA to create children and all that. So what's going to happen in the future is that it won't make sense. It's too much of an inconvenience to have children the old way, especially if we're trying to go to space and go beyond the planet Earth. It's too risky and too much work to wait for a woman's 9-month cycle. And then again, you got to add in, periods and all that. It's more cost effective that they could send nothing but men into space and be able to collect their DNA and mix it, then have replication where they'll create children. It's more cost effective. All these movies where you see men and women going to space, and even now where you see the NASA programs and all that, it costs more money to have, women and men. It's more cost effective to just have a man go to space because, we don't have periods. We have a higher, stronger bone density. And while you're in space, you're actually losing bone density. You know what I mean? So it would, and then, the way men are designed, we're basically kind of like the ants. We go to work, you give a man a bath, some food, he's good to go. You keep him healthy, he's good to go. But a woman's gonna cost more, periods, mood swings, and all that. So it's gonna cost far less money to have a genetically modified baby than it would be to have it the old way. So you're gonna have 3 mouths to feed. Think about it. So you're in space in a spaceship going towards Mars or going towards the moon, and you'd rather have 3 mouths to feed, one inside of the woman getting pregnant. That's, the baby's incubating, or 1 mouth to feed. 1 mouth to feed would be that man is in space and we have some chambers that can basically, through the genetic splicing, create a child, you know. So what's gonna happen is that I'd say in the next 5 to potentially 15 years, we're going to have genetically modified children. Because right now, they're already taking the cells of like a cow. They said if you take just the DNA of a cow, they're creating a steak with that. But we have the rise of the vegan food, and I'll explain that on another video. But we already have, NASA and them. I mean, a lot of scientists are growing human livers into pigs and cow, pigs where they're putting a human's DNA inside the pig. But eventually, we're gonna have genetically modified children. You know what I'm saying? And you know, another thing we're going to have, and this is part 2, why we're going to have GMO babies, is that in the future, especially due to the great divide between men and women, we're going to have genetically modified, children and babies, because pretty soon in the future, if you watch a lot of movies, like I said, you watch a lot of movies, they show you man and women having children and all that, getting married. What's gonna happen, and I'd say in probably, this one's gonna most likely be, it all depends on, this one's actually gonna determine based on feminism. It's all about how, how, how angry women are if they're single. What's gonna happen, and it's most likely gonna again happen through China and some other countries that are, less BS when it comes to science and moving forward. What's gonna happen is we're gonna be able to, pretty soon they're gonna have genetically, GMO people for order, like a GMO husband and a GMO wife for you to basically order. Basically, a human, they're gonna grow extremely fast. We're talking about probably a human, they'll be able to grow in probably like a good to adulthood in probably 12 months to 2 years. They're gonna have something like that where it's gonna be a human with a shorter lifespan, something that could live, you know, half the amount of time we'll live. And what's gonna happen is they're gonna allow you to basically order a husband or a wife they basically created for you through a genetically modified program. And I don't mean to turn it to a joke, but just think about it. You'll be able to, order from some type of cloning facility or some facility where you'll get a husband or wife. But the lifespan of that husband and wife, that GMO husband and GMO wife, is gonna be far shorter. It's gonna be just like how they breed the chickens, how they make them grow so fast. They're gonna eventually, because they're gonna look at it, money, man. Money pushes everything forward. So they're gonna say, you know what? There are people that wanna get married, that want a husband and all that, a wife, or even some people that want a sibling. They're gonna basically start having a genetically modified husband, wife, brother, where you could basically order them. You know what I mean? That's probably gonna be probably depending on the state of feminism. And I don't see China not doing it, and other countries that are less aggressive on it's inhumane and all that stuff. What's gonna happen is they're gonna have basically a farming system for where they create a GMO farm for people. It's not only gonna be for husbands, wives, and stuff like that. It's gonna also be for livers and potentially body transplants as well, where they're basically grow you a new body. You know what I'm saying? That's why when you watch all these futuristic films, it took me a while to look at it, and I saw it. I'm like, it's a lie. It makes no sense that we're in the future and we have hover cars and all this technology. And we're still having children the old primal way. So what's gonna happen, and it's gonna happen, is that we're going to have GMO wives, GMO, husbands, or GMO boyfriends, GMO girlfriends, where you could basically order a person you want, how you want them to look and everything. Most likely it's gonna be pushed by, I'd say, when it comes to GMO husbands and wives and all that. In actuality, the whole GMO baby and having children without woman being pregnant, it's gonna happen through feminism, and it's gonna happen through women basically saying we don't want to be part of the patriarchy. We don't want a man to tell us when we should be their husband, or when we should be their wife, or when we should be their girlfriend. We want a man we can order that will be our man, that follows us and follows every order we give him. So what's gonna happen, it's gonna create a market for where they genetically modify and create men and wives for order, where they'll basically deliver you this woman or this man in a chamber. You know what I'm saying? And that's what's gonna happen. The future, you watch all these films, it's BS, man. We're not gonna. It's being phased out. The thing is this: the governments still want a population, and what they're gonna realize is that it don't matter how we get a population. We need a population. Because right now, mankind, humans are facing extinction. We're facing extinction, due to the practices and stuff like that. I'm going to do a video on that later. I don't want to, dilute this video. But basically, with what's going on with GMO, we're going to have genetically modified husbands and wives made to order. It's coming, you know, and it's going to be truly the end of the natural marriage and such, the natural way of having children between man and woman, especially due to the way the feminists have pushed things. You know, the great divide between men and women, it's occurred, and it's a huge one. So what's gonna happen is we're going to have a great divide, and it's gonna lead to GMO based children, babies, wives, husbands, you name it. It's gonna be made to order, where you just order the type of person you want, blue hair, red hair. The only thing is the genetically modified person won't live as long, you know? And technically that's what the government wants anyway. If we could just have these people live to be about 40 or 50 years old and die, you know, that would be a lot quicker for us than them living longer. But it's too late. They're going to want genetically modified people for that. So that's what's coming, man. We're going to have a GMO babies and GMO husbands, wives, genetically produced in a lab. You know, lab, it's going to be factory level. And, you know, this has been Hold the Truth Hostage, where if the truth was so important, we wouldn't negotiate with.
They said the truth won't survive beside the lies that maintain the decaying faces of